Vad i helvete? Yes, hello?
I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you're looking for success, I can tell you, you don't have it. But what you do have is a particular set of skills. Skills you've acquired over a short YouTube career. Skills that make you a nightmare for people like I. If you make an actual impressive video now, that will be the beginning of it. But if you don't, I will not look for you. I will not share you. And I will ignore you.
Oh, okay. Bye. But what can I do? I know. What if I make a 4-story townhouse with playable interior?
Hi folks, my name is Leif. Welcome to my channel called Devs and Dice. Today I'm going to show you how I crafted my masterpiece so far, I think. A 4-story townhouse with a playable interior consisting of 3 floors and 1 cellar. Before we get cracking, like this video, subscribe if you haven't, and tell me what you think about the build in the comment section down below. I am at the mercy of the all-knowing YouTube algorithm, so anything you can do to help is very much appreciated. Let's have a look at the process.
Lo and behold, I had some plans. I went with this townhouse sketch that I did a couple of weeks ago. As usual, I'm gonna bring out my Proxxon hotwire foam cutter. Now the first thing I'm doing is cutting these 2.5-inch walls. Once I have those cut, I split them in half to create 0.5 centimeter thick walls. Then I bevel them in a 45-degree angle. Here you can see that the bottom floor I decided to be 5 inches in width, and the walls were hot glued in quite quickly. As before, I've created some bricks using that XPS foam, and I textured them by shaking them around with some rocks in a can. Pay particular note to the fact that I'm having 1 centimeter thick bricks at the corners of the building, but I actually slice the bricks in half for the middle sections. Now it was time to start thinking about the actual floors. I decided that I wanted some overhang, which actually wasn't in the sketch. That became 7 inches, which I had to have because the Proxxon can only take about 5 inches or such in height. These, once I halved them, I split them in the middle and created some nice floors using a piece of 3mm board just to strengthen the floor up. Once the floors were drying, I took the opportunity to cut 7-inch long walls. For this build, I would need 8 pieces of 7-inch walls in total. At this point, it's a good idea to texture those walls, and those are going to be stucco, so I textured them using a rolled up ball of aluminum foil. The flooring, I just drew in with a Sharpie some simple planking, which I then textured using my handheld hotwire foam cutter. The underside, or actually more the overhang, needed to be textured as well. And once I had that, I made sure to cover all seams with this timber, which will create also a nice little lip which will hide the seams for these detachable levels. Now once I felt comfortable with that, I glued in the bottom. All of the 7-inch walls are tapered at a 45-degree angle at the edges, just so I can have a nice, neat seam at the corners. As usual, I will be using hot glue to fasten all of the walls to each other. And quite quickly, I managed to get 2 sets of floors, or, well, technically the walls. Now here's a little trick that I like to share. When you have walls like this, it's a good idea to put a little bead of hot glue on the inside to strengthen the build. For the planking on our wooden floors, I choose to use my handheld foam cutter, and I go quite deep where the space between the planks is supposed to be. And then I'm a little bit more gentle with the actual texture or grain of the wood. Once all of these elements are done, it is time to start gluing the ceiling or the floor to the walls. Now, for the first one, I used some white glue because I thought that the seam would be less visible. But in actuality, I actually went on with hot glue for the rest of the build, I think. And as you can see, that little lip creates a nice seam that can't really be seen from the outside, but you can lift off each and every floor quite simple. Now, just to make sure that these floors are stuck a little bit more, I added some screws onto the walls and some magnets into the floor. I've done this before in my previous builds, and it works pretty good with me. This way you don't have to really concern yourself about polarity because it's a simple case of magnets to metal. As you might have seen in my sketch, I had a bunch of, I guess you can call it outcroppings in the building. Now, this is quite an interesting fact. The more outcroppings and irregularities you have in your building, the better it will look. I promise you. Next time you build something like a house, try to make something wacky here and there. And you'll see that it actually gives it a whole bunch of more characters, and your players will instantly remember this building. Here you can see that I'm putting on a whole bunch of those characteristic Tudor style timbers. Now, I chose to use planking primarily in two different sizes. One smaller for the windows and one larger for the actual walls. I also added some supports because I knew at this point that I wanted to come in with some sort of extended roof to give cover for the players as they enter this building. Now, this roof was quite thin and I textured it in a wood style, and then I came in with my individual shingles. Now, these shingles were done exactly like I did with my previous build. Once you watch this video, feel free to check out my other socials as seen on screen now. Now, when it came to the gable, this was quite a difficult cut because it was so angled, so I decided to use Army Painter's handheld hot wire foam cutter. And as before, I just add the metal ruler to give me a nice guide, and that will make the cut straight enough. It won't be perfectly straight, but the angles are so small that it won't really matter. Once I had that centimeter block of gables cut, I split it in two, just as I've done with all of the other elements in this build. And that gives me two gables. Now here I'm sorry, this was just pure dumb luck. Here I'm cutting the actual sides of the ceiling, and you could see that the Proxon could just handle it. And like I said, that was pure dumb luck. I did not plan that. Another tip I can say is that when you're using a low temperature hot glue gun, you can quickly wipe off the excess with your finger. It might sting a little bit, but you know, it doesn't hurt all that bad. But again, use a low temperature hot glue gun. Once I had the roof section all sorted out, I come in with some timbers just to hide all of those seams. And here I thought of a crazy little idea. I wanted actually not square windows, but round. And again, it complicates things, yes, but it gives it a little bit more character. And during these ages, I could easily imagine that, you know, someone with a round window would either be a hobbit or perhaps they, you know, were more wealthy. What do I know? With the handheld foam cutter, I could easily carve out a somewhat round hole. Now here is another outcrop in the roof which I built, and I just built the entire thing taking some measurements and then I hot glue it into place. And the technique for making that is exactly like the rest of the house, so there's nothing strange with that. Now at this point I had actually forgotten about the actual entrance. In my sketch I had stairs. But I really didn't want to have stairs, partly because scale-wise they always look a little bit wonky if you make them functional, so I just made, what do you call this, a slope or a raise? Now, as you can see, I glued in some planks which I wanted to function as some sort of more porch-like structure. Now, in order to make this believable, I added some beams to support the planking, and then I just bricked the entire thing so that it looked like it was a solid wall. Now, if we have some sort of porch that is elevated, of course we need to have some sort of railing. So I just added some small bits of XPS foam, which I had skewered with a toothpick to ensure strength. Now, for reasons unknown and probably unholy, I created one of these chutes which will function as, you've guessed it, some sort of shit chute, I guess. I got the idea from Dave from Table Ready Gaming, so thanks for that, Dave. Now here I am going through and creating more of these shingles. You can see that I have already prepared a piece and then I just slice it into thin pieces, which I then slice into individual shingles. And here you can also see that I bend each individual shingle just to get a little bit more character on it. This gives it, I feel like, a little bit more of a feeling that the actual wooden shingles have had moisture on them and they start to bend as wood usually does. Now the chimney was created quite quickly with some paper, some toothpicks and a tubing. Now these shingles were over in mere moments, but they took plenty of time, I can promise you that. In addition, I'm adding some supports here and there, some window shutters, even for the round windows. And speaking of windows, my favorite way of making these windows is to use some wire and then some UV resin. And lo and behold, can you see that I'm actually using nitrate gloves? Yes, your fellow Viking believes in keeping it safe as much as we can. Now these windows are actually quite quickly done, but the problem was these round ones. I decided to use some Sculpey, and which I just made some round circles with, and then I just sculpted some cross beams, would you call it that? Some X's in the middle of the windows using that Sculpey. Now I had some additional Sculpey, so I created one of those weather things and a little bit of a wooden board. While that was baking in the oven, I took the opportunity and Mod Podged the entirety of the build, and it's quite a lot, as you can see. Now over to painting this. I started with zenithaling the entire building, and at this point I actually had it assembled just to make sure that I got a nice realistic preview of how the light and shadows would play on the surfaces of the building. Now you might have noticed this. This is my ground floor, so this is actually for the cellar. And I also created two sets of stairs, one for the cellar and one for the wooden floors. This is just to sort of simulate where the stairs would be, because I didn't want to cut holes into the actual floors. Now once it came to painting, I actually got sent some very good airbrush paints from Army Painter. And these happen to come in a bone color. So I started with the base color of the bone and covered all of the different stucco walls. Then I went up one level to mid-range and then finally to the highest brightness in that scale. And it gave me a very nice result very quickly. And ironically enough, I had already decided beforehand that I wanted the roof tiles to be colored in a sort of blue-green tone. And I got another one of the Army Painter airbrush paints that I used as a base coat. Now here's a little trick I wanted to show you. In order to get rid of that airbrushed sort of look and feel, I just go in with almost dirty, paint water. It's a little bit brownish, and I just stipple that onto the edges where the stucco is. All of the stones are base coated with Dungeon Grey, and here I am coming in and dry brushing all of the wood with Basilisk Brown. All of the stones, I wanted to have some variation in them, so I used the base color of the bone and also some various paints from Army Painter that went in the gray range, some that were more green, some that were more blue. Now it's time to have some payoff, finally, for all of that texturing. Dry brushing the roof was honestly a pure pleasure. It was so fun to see the roof come to life. Here I'm using two colors, which are Royal Cloak and Toxic Mist. Now for all of the stones, I simply used the Game Master paints that I got from Army Painter, so this is a brighter gray, and then finally I'm gonna go in with what I would say is almost a pure white color to dry brush all of the stones. Now here's a little bit of a different thing. I usually cover the entire project with my homemade wash, but in this case I actually liked the look of all of the other elements, so I only washed the stone elements. Once the wash had dried, I came back in with that white color and dry brushed very, very carefully. Now of course you can't have a shit shoot without attracting rats, so I painted in some rats into the corner. I also used some military shader just to give the hint of moss here and there. I glued in the windows, added some details, and now I think it's time that we look at the final result. Alright folks, so if you're still with me, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you so much for watching. Now if you liked the video, then please do smash that like button and please consider subscribing. All of this will help the channel out immensely. And of course, the best way to help me make more content is to pledge a few dollars and join my Patreon. Joining will give you access to my private Discord server where we have a great community of creative and supportive people. And on that note, I want to thank my dear patrons for their support over the past weeks. So thank you so much, Andrew Cummings, Brandon, Michael Milligan, Nicholas O'Sullivan, Ryan Lewis Barron the Rock, Shane Murphy, Stefan Winter, Stephen Jarvis, Sunny Headcase, Blake Crowell, Bo Ahlgren, Chris Gropp, Volker Göhler, And a special shout out goes to my champion and legend level patrons: Chris Sagers, 4VXP, Mad Nurse, Leander, and Niklas Swedenlind. Thank you so much, my fellow Vikings. You are amazing. I hope you have enjoyed the video and have a nice day. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.